From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Podcast. Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. Now, here's your host and bud tender, Gary Johnston.
Welcome back. You came back for episode 26. Thank you for coming by. If this is your first time, thank you for taking a peek. Here at the Cannabis Podcast, we spend about a half an hour every episode looking at all kinds of different information about cannabis, and today is no exception. In fact, we have some really interesting information about cannabis this week. The cannabis information that you need to know if you are at all considering, and by this time, if you're considering it, you're probably doing it, and that is growing your own cannabis this year. We'll touch on a bizarre story that happened to a woman living in Revelstoke, British Columbia. Her name is Anna Minten, and she is going to be our feature interview today. And unfortunately, she became the first victim of our new cannabis cultivation laws. She hasn't actually been charged yet, but a conversation with Anna is coming up a little bit later. A real bizarre story going to make you shake your head. Now, to try and understand that story better, we're actually going to introduce the episode with a look at the BC government's info page about home grows and what are the details of that particular legislation we all need to pay attention to. And then we're going to take another stop on Cultivar Corner, this time for a CV dominant strain called Great White Shark. And because of the terpene profile in that Great White Shark, Cultivar Corner this week is probably going to turn into a bit of an education session on a couple of new terpenes, guaiol and bisabolol. All of that and more is coming up for you on episode 26 of the Cannabis Podcast. Before we dive into today's feature interview with Anna Minten from Revelstoke, I thought it was appropriate to give some context. And the context I want to provide is what the actual law states in the province of British Columbia in regards to growing cannabis at home. In the interview, I make reference to what was considered, before I looked it up, the idea that the only time you could be charged with having your plants visible from a public space is when they are a flowering cannabis plant. I could find nothing in the legislation, and I'm going to give you just one or two paragraphs out of the actual legislation that confirms that. So that part of the interview, I want you to realize before you hear it, there is some question about whether that is accurate or not, or whether that is required. However, the gist of the interview is over the fact of what is considered a public place, and when is it viable, or when does it cross over that line between a private and public place. So I'm only going to give you a couple of pieces from the cannabis legislation, and this is obtained from getcannabisclarity.ca. I put the link on the Cannabis Podcast so you can take a peek at it. And the first instance is, where can non-medical cannabis plants be grown at home? And this is really the key paragraph. Subject to possible property owner and local government restrictions, cannabis can be grown indoors or outdoors, including a yard, private deck, or balcony, as long as the plants are generally not visible from a public place. Examples of public places include parks, streets, sidewalks, sports fields, and K-12 school properties. If a neighbor can see cannabis plants from their home, deck, yard, or other private place, it is not a violation of the provincial law. And that's really the key statute that I want to confirm. I've also put a link to the actual Cannabis Act for BC back on cannabispodcast.com. You can take a look at it yourself. And from that, I'm only going to read really one or two paragraphs that do not stipulate that the plant must be in flower. And that again is relation to where it can happen. And that is in section 56, paragraph G. The cannabis plant is not visible from a place described in paragraph A of the definition of public place, which we've already covered, by an individual unaided by any device other than a device to correct vision. So that means it just simply can be seen from a public place without a periscope or binoculars or whatever sneaky way they want to take a peek at it. That's the context that I think was important before we get into the interview, which covers the fact that a couple up in Revelstoke in this last week had a very unfortunate circumstance that involved the definition of a public place when seeing cannabis plants. I was infuriated this last week when I heard that story about the couple up in Revelstoke. They had put their garden on one of the local garden tours, as many communities do around our country, something that they had been doing for a few years now. But they didn't realize the fact that a off-duty police officer was going to take the tour this year would change their life completely. Anna Minten is here. She's graciously agreed to my invitation for an interview, and she's going to tell us all about what happened to them as a result of that garden tour and the events that occurred afterwards. Give us the story, Anna. So you started growing your cannabis plants. When did you plant them?
Well, actually, a friend of ours dropped off 3 very sad, sickly plants, and being the gardener that I am, I was like, ooh, this is legal. This is fun. I'm going to throw them in my garden. And so that's basically what we did. We threw these sad little plants in the garden and brought them back to life.
Okay. And then, so they were growing fine. I'm assuming they were starting to thrive.
Yeah, they were quite healthy. Yeah, they were, they weren't flowering or anything, so we still weren't sure if they were male or female, but they were healthy. And so every year, our local food initiative, which is a not-for-profit that brings food sustainability to the community, holds a fundraiser where locals open up their garden and artists partake in showcasing their art within the gardens. And people buy a map and they go around and check out how everyone grows their own food. It's more about food. It's not about as much flowers. So on that very special occasion, we had a off-duty officer stop by, and according to their report, we were blatant in our violation of public display.
Wow.
And we had no idea. We had no clue that was, the case. I definitely did not do my due diligence, I guess you could say, of looking deep into the new bylaws, because the news did such a good job being like 4 plants per household. Like, sweet.
Exactly. Exactly. So from context then, so you got these plants given to you. You had already, I'm assuming, signed up to have your garden on this garden tour.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was well in place before you actually brought the cannabis plants into your yard.
Yes. Yeah, we partaken in it. We've partaken in it a few years. We love opening up our garden for the community.
Yeah, and a lot of communities do it. I think it's a great idea, a good way for people to explore their own local community, but didn't turn out so well for you.
No, it didn't. Or the community, as the RCMP officer put it, shined a negative light on the local food initiative and our community. And I was like, I don't think we did that.
You sure didn't. I mean, that's insane. And I mean, I've been watching the reaction on Twitter and various social media outlets since this happened to you. And the outrage is huge.
It's huge, yeah.
And of course, the other stipulation is that this particular twist on the act, where they must not be visible to a public space, is unique to British Columbia.
Yes, yeah.
And you were not aware of this beforehand?
No.
Yeah, it's a real twist. We gotta get in contact with our premier and figure out why the heck we have that kind of legislation.
And the clarity of the words too is a big play on it. A lot of people go, okay, well, a lot of plants grow, taller than 6 feet, and most fences it can't be taller than 6 feet. So does that take everybody out now? And what is the definition of public place? The learning curves within these new legislations are to be expected. Their use of resources and how they enforced it were completely, in my perspective, and now I'm seeing in many others across the nation, are agreeing it was ridiculous. It was a silly reaction. Yeah.
So let's step people through exactly what happened. So the garden tour happened. This undercover officer was there. What happened from that point? What was the next point you knew that something was wrong? We
didn't realize anything was wrong until we got home from a Friday night dinner. All our lights were left on as we walked by our basement tenants. They're like, are you okay? And we're like, yeah, totally clueless. But I was already like, oh, why is Meta tied up? Meta's our dog. We left her inside the house. Like, that's weird. Why are all the lights on? That's weird, And then we got into the house and the search warrant sitting on a stool right in front of the door there. And we're like, what just happened?
Holy.
So then I came outside and, the girls, our tenants that lived downstairs were still there. And I was like, what did we just miss? Like, And they're like, oh, we thought you knew. We're like, no, like, honestly, what just went down? And they're like, oh, there's, 5 cops and 3 cruisers. And I was like, yeah, okay. So that, the first night was basically shock. And then the next couple of days were digestion and trying to understand, what had happened.
And they took your plants, obviously. They ripped them out.
Yeah, yeah.
And any other peripheral damage to the place that occurred through the search?
No. They took the 3 plants, and no, leaving the lights on. Oh, I guess they cut the lock and left, our shed door open.
And I assume that they're not going to buy you a new lock for that.
Oh, I would be really stoked with just an apology. A new lock would be great.
Yeah.
Some new plants would be nice too. I don't know.
Yeah, but an apology definitely.
Yeah, apology would be great.
Have you been officially charged at this point?
No, I am still in the limbo mode, and I've been informed that they have up to a year to make the decision, so I can be sitting in limbo mode for a very long time. So I'm not really, this is actually quite frustrating. I'm not sure where to move forward with it. Everyone, obviously not everyone, but many people have contacted me and encouraging me to go forward. Social media is stating a lot of the same stories. So yeah, it's, we'll see.
What is your plan of attack at this point? You're just going to kind of sit back and live life normally and not worry about it until something else comes up?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's, I'm not really sure where to go with it at this point. It's kind of a total limbo. I'd like clarity. I'd like finalization. And so I may press forward just even to get that. But it's not really something that I want to do. It's going to court doesn't sound like fun. Going against RCMP doesn't sound like fun. Everyone's like, oh, they wasted taxpayer dollars. I'm like, yeah, well, if I go to court and try to deal with this, that's also wasting taxpayer dollars. So I don't know.
And your dollars too.
And my dollars and my time. So yeah, it's, I definitely think the conversation being sparked, is important. I think better understanding what these laws really are is important. Do I agree with their actions? Heck no. But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. Yeah. There's no point for me to linger on it until I need to be brought back up, or hopefully it never comes up again.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't do any good to linger on it any longer. So you're good to take that perspective.
Yeah.
So twisting our look a little bit, what's your opinion of the cannabis laws to date? Forgetting what just happened to you in this last week. Before that, what was your opinion of where we were with legalization?
In my small town, it was interesting because, pot was legal, but we didn't have any legal shops to buy it from. The closest place was 2.5 hours away. So it's one of those, it's legal, but it's not really legal, kind of situations is what it's feeling like if you're going to change laws and shift things around the way that they have, it would be important that, the enforcement be taught the same shifts as well. I see a lot of this reaction to them still being used to their ways of reacting the way they used to react to.
That's how I see it
cannabis.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was kind of one of those like, oh yeah, right. It's legal. Oops. I mean, obviously they knew what they were looking for in the new Cannabis Act, but I just can't believe that given it's a new law, instead of being like, hey, did you know that you were breaking the new law? I would have been like, no. They referred to it as, well, would you speed? And I said, well, no, because that's a very well-known law.
Wow.
You can't refer that to the same thing. Like, this is a brand spanking new law. So it's about informing the people about it and not just jumping to enforcement. Like, had they come and knocked on my door and said, hey, did you know you're breaking a law? I'd been like, thanks for letting me know. And then I would have called all my friends and been like, yo, cover up your plants.
Exactly. Give it an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this isn't, I know I'm not the only one who saw the, it's legal, but is it? To what degree? And how much access do we actually have to it? And where are the definitions, clarified? Like, was it going to be me in court clarifying this? Had I not brought this forward to the public for, that's very possibly a way it could have gone. So I'm grateful that I did speak up. But
As
at the
many
same
of us
time,
are.
it's at the same time, I'm like, oh, what did I just
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
Whoops.
Why did it have to be me?
Yeah. I'm okay with it. It had to be me because I'm good at dealing, I guess, with this stuff and not letting it linger and holding resentment. We're all just doing our best,
Well,
and that's
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I admire your courage for speaking up and not being afraid to talk about what has happened, because I think it's going to be benefit to all of us eventually. Eventually, they'll figure this crap out and it'll get better.
Yeah.
At least I hope it will.
That's my hope too, and I truly believe we will get there. It is going to be more conversations like this and more understanding of, okay, where were they coming from? And, that's the part of the story, unfortunately, that I still don't really have.
Okay.
I've opened up a pretty good platform for them to truly explain themselves. Our local reporter, journalist, Erin Orlando, has been doing a very good job as well as trying to get to the bottom of it. But a lot of it is still really weird and fuzzy and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so it's not just bringing up the conversation of what are the new laws and how to be aware of them, but what's going on with your campaign.
Well, and the first thing that jumps to my mind when I first heard the story was, it does say, they must not be visible from a public space, but it's when they're flowering. So that's what I can't get in this story, is how this ever got any further when there's no flower on your plants yet.
Yeah. Well, that's, there's a lot of interesting little tidbits and questions to it. And I think that's what I was originally looking for clarity on. And I didn't know how else to go about it. And and I think now everyone else is also curious for clarity on that.
It's the central point in my mind. I mean, why was the action taken when the full context of the law wasn't broken?
Well, and that's the thing is, like, a lot of people are going, well, yeah, because they were trying to iron out maybe some of these details in court. And, like that, when they released the premature bill or Cannabis Act, that they didn't, they kind of foresaw that this is a normal part of the growing pains. At what point did the miscommunication happen, of enforcement versus education, like the extremes that they went to take down 3 plants is quite extreme.
It sure is. A number of police cruisers, right? Like it wasn't just one.
It was 3 cruisers and 5 police. Yeah.
For those mean, nasty cannabis plants.
And I guess they went through like a 24-hour judicial
review, or
to get the warrant. It was an after hours warrant application. Like a lot of the actions, like now that I'm getting more information on it, I'm just like, what? Like this isn't my specialty, but like, can someone explain what's going on?
Yeah. You don't need to be a specialist in that to get that this is really odd.
No, and there's other weird, there's just a lot of little bits and twists to the story that I'm just like, what am I, like, very confused, very, very confused. Like, by all means, my name in the community is not one to fear. And, I very clearly have a pretty open door policy that you can come and talk to me. So I just found the whole from start to finish, I opened my heart to the community. And, you could have just said, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to executing, I guess, they were, watching me for like the week prior to the execution of the warrant to verify who lives here and that, and I'm just going, knock on my door and I'll say, yes, here's my license. I do live here.
Exactly. It's a lot simpler than it made out to be. The side effect that also has me really concerned, Anna, is how I've seen some people react with right. Rushing out and getting rid of their plants and cleaning up their yards when I don't really think they need to.
No, and I've seen that reaction too. A lot of anger. I think it, triggered a lot of bad responses or experiences that people have had.
Yeah.
And just, the reaction blew my mind. It was more than I was asking for sure. But at the same time, I said, this is a great opportunity for this conversation now. But what I'm finding interesting is that no RCMP spokesperson wants to comment on any of it. We're not moving forward with that. So
wow.
The conversation doesn't continue, and all these people are, like you said, left in this like, are my kids going to be taken away because I'm growing, 3 pot plants in my backyard? Like, that's not legalization in my mind.
It sure isn't, and I mean, personally, I've got 4 plants growing, and, they've been growing this year. They're doing quite well. And I won't give any more details on them because who knows what might happen in that regard. But
that's it. That's silly
it.
That you should be concerned about that. And that's kind of why I was so baffled. I had them on display. I had so many people be like, "Oh, this is neat. This is informational." I had no idea that that to me is what the garden tour was about. I have all kinds of weird plants that I try to grow. I find it quite enjoyable. I've got chickpeas and lemongrass and eucalyptus and all kinds of things that you don't normally grow, and just to see if I can. And so for me, this was like another neat opportunity. Had they been in full flower, I probably would have covered them out, just because to me that is, I don't know, maybe out of more respect. At that point, they are closer to a medicine than a plant, but they weren't. So,
yeah, they weren't. So you weren't being blatant about anything.
I didn't think I was.
Yeah, you didn't think you were. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, I'm certainly going to keep my ears on this story as it develops, Anna, and like to kind of keep in touch and see if there's any further developments that we can share with everybody on the Cannabis podcast.
Yeah, I hope to hear more about it too.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
I bet you do.
And it to be over, to be honest. But,
I bet you. Yeah, I no doubt about that. Can I finish up with a few hot seat questions to get some other answers for you? What's your favorite strain?
Oh, I actually don't know. I'm not that fancy with it. I enjoy it because it calms my mind, my overthinking mind, but I can't say I like it to taste good. Okay. Well, that's good. That's a clear need. Do you prefer smoking joints or do you vaporize? Joints, definitely.
Okay. And do you have a favorite munchie that you might partake in once you are partaking?
No, it's kind of whatever mood I'm in, and then I make it.
Okay, that sounds even better. And one final one, do you prefer, have you done any edibles or do you stick with flower?
I've tried a few edibles, but I find that they're really hard to moderate how much you're consuming, and then before you know it, you can't go backwards. So I kind of like to stick to my, couple of hoots here and there, and that's my level of enjoyment.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me, Anna. I appreciate the time, and I hope the rest of the year has no further surprises coming your way.
Unless they're really good surprises, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess one final thing, do you have any advice for anybody you'd like to leave people thinking about after our conversation?
Just keep living from your heart. It'll all work out.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You're welcome. All right, thank you. Take care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
THC, CBD, terpene profiles, what's in me? Oh, please explain to me. Cultivar Corner, Cultivar Corner, oh yeah. Cultivar Corner, please explain this stuff to me.
I still like listening to that piece of music. And this week on Cultivar Corner, we're taking a kind of a different approach. Primarily because the strain we're using this week is Great White Shark. This is from San Rafael. Its profile, total CBD is 13.25%. Total THC is 6.89%. And this is one of the last products that we picked up from Spirit Leaf when we went up to visit the store up in Vernon. And thanks again to Sarah Ballantyne for giving me some of the details in the terpene profiles for this particular strain. Because that's where this one kind of deviates from the others, and it's likely going to evolve into a discussion more of terpenes. And here's the reason why. Great White Shark is carefully cultivated 2-to-1 sativa strain that offers the benefits of both CBD and THC. It's enhanced by a unique and earthy aroma, and now you see that the mighty is ready, or rather you hear the mighty is ready. The strain is very sticky and resinous to the touch with light green leaves and dark, thick orange hairs. We'll get to the terpenes in just a moment. I'm just going to comment on the resinous to the touch. Yeah, to a certain extent. It's not really, really sticky. The leaves are a light green, and there definitely are some very dark, thick orange hairs through it. Oh, a couple of real beauties in that regard. But here's where it gets interesting and where we're likely going to evolve into more of an education, and that is in regards to terpenes. The terpenes that are prevalent in great white shark are myrcene, not a surprise. That is, of course, the most prevalent terpene in cannabis. And myrcene is one of the few terpenes that directly reacts or directly interacts with our CB1 and CB2 receptors, lubricating those receptors so they accept more of the cannabinoids that are coming. And then the two new ones, guaiol and bisabolol. And we're actually going to look into each of those because they're adding some different properties to our cannabis this time. But before we do that, let me just take a couple of hits and get myself established with some great white shark. And because I wanted to spend more time actually reviewing the terpene information, I'm not going to spend as much time letting you hear me talk this time. Probably many of you are saying, oh, thank goodness. Finally, he stopped doing that. It may still come back. But the effects that I have received or achieved by doing my appropriate inhalation with great white shark, that's what we'll talk about, and then we're going to dive into the terpenes. Appreciating that a CBD dominant strain is not going to have the same psychoactive effects as a THC dominant strain, so I'm not looking for my happy eyes in this instance. I'm looking for a different happy feeling. Hopefully just a general sense of happiness and well-being. And no particular pains I'm trying to deal with today in terms of the CBD that may help in that regard. Just kind of get a sense of where this is going. To give it a true opportunity for full effect as well, I did 2 bowls through the mighty. Finished one, then decided to move on to another and see what the effects of the combined bowl usage would be. It's too bad that there's not a measurement we can use to determine how much I'm putting into a bowl in the vaporizer and how many milligrams of THC or CBD that's going to end up as a result in my body. Anybody listening? Anybody feel like inventing such a device? I'll be one of the first ones to test it for you. I am always intrigued by cannabis and its effect. Because I've done those 2 bowls now, well, most of the way through the second bowl. And maybe it's my naivete in regards to CBD strains and a 7% THC ratio. I wasn't expecting to get a buzz, but I'm stoned. Like, not super stoned. And I don't have that euphoric high that I might get with a really nice sativa. But I'm happy. I'm feeling pretty good, which I think puts me in a real good position to carry on with the rest of the podcast. And as usual, all of the links that I'm about to talk about, you can find back at cannabispodcast.com if you want to check out the information for yourself. Now that I'm happy, a little stoned, and ready to rock, it's time for us to do a bit deeper of a dive into a couple of new terpenes. And the first terpene we're going to look at today in relation to great white shark is guaiol. They can't make terpene names simple, can they? The terpene pinene gets most of the credit for giving certain cannabis strains a pungent, evergreen, and minty aroma. After all, pinene is one of the most prevalent terpenes found in cannabis, as well as one of the most heavily researched. However, there is a less common terpene that also brings similar pine flavors to the equation, and that is the terpene guaiol. It has a host of therapeutic benefits, and also shows up in a few well-known strains, albeit in small amounts on the market today. Guaiol, sometimes referred to as champicol, differs from many other terpenes, which are all oil-based, because of its unique structure as a liquid. Guaiol is most prominent in the hard, oily timber of the tropical guaiacum plant, an evergreen variety mostly found in the Caribbean as well as other subtropical regions. Coniferous trees such as cypress pines contain wood that is also known to carry guaiol. Aside from its prominent pine-like aromas, wood and rose notes are also present in its terpene profile. Now, with a lower-than-average boiling point for terpenes, guaiol needs to be vaporized at low temperatures to be fully enjoyed, at about 92 degrees Celsius or 198 degrees Fahrenheit. The medical benefits of guaiol? Modern research is a little limited, though we do know that the guaiacum plant, from which the compound is mainly derived, has been used extensively in natural medicine for quite some time. Guaiol is commonly known as anti-inflammatory. A 2016 study shows that when used in conjunction with other essential oils, guaiol can have antiparasitic properties and antioxidant properties. In mice, guaiol can potentially reduce tumors and strengthen the effects of chemotherapy. Although not therapeutically beneficial, it has also been shown that similar to other terpenes such as terpinolene, guaiol can also be used as an insect repellent. And that's the first of our 2 new terpenes identified in great white shark. And the second one we want to talk about is bisabolol. This is bisabolol. And again, in the case of each of these, there is a link to this information that you can check out for yourself. The terpene bisabolol is a fragrant chemical compound produced by the chamomile flower and other plants, such as the candia tree in Brazil. It's also produced by various cannabis strains. While it's long been widely used in the cosmetics industry, bisabolol has more recently become a subject of research for the medical benefits it displays in cannabis. Bisabolol's effects and benefits: anti-inflammatory, anti-irritant, antioxidant, antimicrobial, and analgesic. And those are the 2 new terpenes, at least new to the Cannabis podcast, in great white shark, with a CBD ratio of 13.25% and a THC of 6.89% that made me feel good. Also got me a little stoned. And what the heck, gave me a little bit of an education as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the conclusion of episode number 26. Next week, we will look for another cultivar. As always, if you have any comments or some suggestions for future episodes, please let me know at info@cannabispodcast.com. And that does it for episode 26 of the Cannabis Podcast.
From the cannabis-infused studio, high above the Okanagan Valley, this was the Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
Hi, my name is Kira Reed, and I'd like to invite you to be inspired by the women who are leading in the cannabis industry. Each week, we will discuss empowerment, leadership, and what it means to be a woman in charge in marijuana, hemp, and CBD. As the founder of the Women Empowered in Cannabis community, I have had the great pleasure to get to know many brilliant and talented women who are CEOs, executives, politicians, advocates, and community leaders that are focused on creating a cannabis economy that is just, fair, and equal. We'll learn how these women make decisions, how they navigate a predominantly male industry, and what they're doing to level the playing field for women. I hope you'll join us.